First, let's start with this case. I, female 32, and my husband, male 31, were driving home late at night from a friend's place. It was past midnight, and both of us were feeling tired. I still needed to take our dogs out for a walk when we got home. During the drive, we discussed something that was emotionally difficult for me, and I ended up in tears. When we arrived home, my husband asked a follow-up question about my feelings. I answered him, and after a brief silence, I got out of the car, went inside, and took the dogs out. When I returned, my husband was already going about his nightly routine, cooking something to eat and watching Netflix. I brushed my teeth, fed the animals, and still feeling emotional, went straight to the bedroom. I didn't want to disturb his routine since I knew he would join me once he was done. I got under the covers, feeling miserable, and cried quietly. A little while later, my husband came into the room. I was still awake and visibly upset. To my surprise, he put in his earplugs and said, "Good night," in a sarcastic and harsh tone. Shocked, I asked him why he was speaking to me like that. He responded by saying, "Think about it till morning." When I insisted on knowing what I had done wrong, he told me that I had offended him by getting out of the car while we were still mid-conversation. He said he would have let that slide, but he felt further disrespected when I didn't inform him that I was going to bed after brushing my teeth, which he considered bad manners. I do acknowledge that we have a habit of informing each other when we're heading to bed, but this time I was overwhelmed with emotions and just wanted some privacy to cry. Eventually, he apologized for his words, but I'm still feeling deeply hurt by the situation. Let's start judging. So the last time your husband saw you, you were crying, or at the very least, in the immediate aftermath of crying, and he chose to complete his normal routine instead of checking in with you. That's fine, especially if the subject was also upsetting for him. Doing his normal routine might help him reset his equilibrium, but it's a choice that he made, knowing that his spouse was upset. Up to this point, no one is in the wrong. But then he comes in and immediately picks a fight with you, instead of checking to see if you were okay, which would have been patently obvious if he'd taken 2 seconds to look at your tear-stained face. You're not in the wrong, many times over. In fact, his level of self-centeredness in the face of your obvious distress is so over the top that I'm forced to wonder if this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to suggest that you read this book and see if you recognize other concerning patterns of behavior. You're not in the wrong. He responded very poorly to you, and I'm sorry for that. You should not have had to spell it out for him, as he knew you were upset. He should have given you the time and support you needed to move through your emotions and feelings, and provided that shoulder for you to cry on. He dropped the ball on this one, and I'm glad he apologized to you. You're not in the wrong. He knew you were crying, that you were vulnerable, and instead of being understanding that you simply went to bed without telling him, a pretty minor thing regardless of your routine, he told you, "Good night, and think about it till morning." I'm sorry. What the ever-loving hell? In what world is that an okay response to an already upset partner? Even if you'd done some major faux pas, which I don't believe you did, his response is absolutely lacking in compassion and empathy. If he had to confront you about it, he could have still been civil about it and just said, "Hey, I'm sorry you're still upset, but I wish you'd told me you were going to bed rather than just disappearing." See how much more palatable that way of communicating is? Gets his point across without being a dick about it. I don't know your marriage or your life, but this is not okay. You're not in the wrong. He would have come to check on you if he was actually concerned. Swearing at you like that when you're crying is really ugly behavior. I hope he doesn't often treat you like that. Next up, I've always dreamed of moving out of my family home because of the constant drama I faced growing up. I finally moved out around 2022, but after some time, my parents convinced me that paying rent elsewhere didn't make sense when I could live at home for free. Since I've been trying to save up to buy my own place someday, this seemed like a reasonable idea. However, ever since moving back, I've been asked to cover various expenses with promises that I would be reimbursed. At first, it was occasional amounts, around $200 here and there. But over time, these requests escalated to $1,000, and eventually as much as $10,000. To give you some context, we live in a well-off neighborhood in a house with 7 bedrooms and marble floors. From the outside, it looks like we're financially comfortable. However, my mom has explained to me several times that they are struggling to pay off the mortgage for both our current home and our previous one. Naturally, I considered suggesting, why not just sell the old house? But since it's our childhood home, my parents are emotionally attached to it, and selling it seems out of the question. I've politely asked my parents about when I can expect my money back, but their responses are always vague. Things like, I can't talk about that right now, or just be patient, it's coming. That was over a year ago. Whenever I try to bring up the topic, it's difficult to have a productive conversation without them becoming upset or defensive. At this point, it feels like they're hoping I'll simply forget about the money altogether. I'm a student who pays for my own tuition and works part-time. While I appreciate living at home without paying rent, the inconsistent promises and guilt-tripping have made me question whether staying is worth it. As of now, they owe me around $25,000. Am I in the wrong for pressing them to pay me back? Edit, for those suggesting that I should move into our other house or buy it off my parents since I've contributed so much already, I wish that were possible. Unfortunately, my relatives are currently renting that property, and besides, $25,000 isn't enough for a down payment. While I know I shouldn't be overly optimistic, my parents have mentioned that the only reason they're holding on to the property is so they can eventually pass it down to either me or my sister. Let's start judging. No, you're not in the wrong, but learn a lesson from this. Money lent to friends and family is pretty much given away and will rarely be seen again. You're not in the wrong, but agree with other comments that you should learn from this. IMO going through the legal system would be the best way to ensure you get your money back, especially if they lose their temper and sounds like they gaslight you every time you bring it up. Perhaps you move into the other house. Consider the $25,000 a down payment and take over payments on it. It stays in the family too. Next up, about a week ago, my cat went missing after slipping out of the house. I was devastated. I put his litter box outside, hung flyers all over the neighborhood, and cried nonstop. It was a really difficult few days. At one point, I noticed that someone was taking down my flyers. This made me even more upset, so I started knocking on my neighbors' doors to ask if anyone had seen my cat. One neighbor mentioned overhearing a child excitedly telling his mom about their new cat. Curious, I walked over to that house, and when I got close, I saw my cat sitting in their windowsill. The moment he saw me, he started pawing at the glass, and it broke my heart. I knocked on their door and explained to the woman who answered that this was my cat, that he was microchipped, and that I could prove ownership. Instead of listening, she laughed at me and slammed the door. I knocked again, and this time a large man came to the door, told me, "This is my son's cat, go away," and slammed the door again. Heartbroken, I went home in tears and called my dad, who happens to be the county sheriff. I wasn't trying to use his position to my advantage, I just didn't know what else to do, and I wanted advice on how to handle the situation. He told me to stay home, and he would send a deputy over to deal with it. The deputy went to their house, and thankfully I got my cat back. However, it seems the deputy mentioned that I'm the sheriff's daughter, and now the woman is telling the whole neighborhood that I'm a spoiled brat who ran to my dad to solve my problems. On top of that, the man who answered the door ended up being arrested because the deputy ran his license plate and discovered he had an outstanding warrant. Now, the woman is also accusing me of getting her partner sent to jail, but I had no idea he had a warrant. I was just trying to get my cat back. So, am I wrong for calling my dad for help in this situation? I honestly would have called the police anyway, but since I was so upset, I reached out to my dad first because I didn't want to be crying on the phone to a stranger if I could avoid it. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. He got what you deserved, he stole your cat. Are you going to get your cat back? OP replied, the deputy brought him back. He's curled up next to me right now. And the commenter said, good, and don't feel guilty. Not even for a second. It's not your fault he got arrested. The catnapper is spewing some huge cow manure. Her partner got himself arrested. he was going to jail either way, even if he hadn't stolen the cat. She laughed in your face when you explained the situation and wanted your cat back. Then she sent out her man to intimidate you into going away. He already has a warrant, and you actually did the community a favor by getting him locked up through your catnapping complaint. You are not a brat, and the catnapper is a cheap person who stole someone's cat to get a free pet and even took down the flyers so that the missing cat would go unnoticed. You rightfully cried to your dad, and he just happens to be the sheriff. Of course, he's going to A, look out for his little girl, and B, do his job because this is stolen property that the thief refuses to give back. She's just pissed that her stolen cat got taken away and that her partner got caught. Lumeo. Here's my best advice. Give your cat some pets, a treat or two, and a little kiss on the head. Poor baby. You could tell he missed you because he pawed at the door when he saw you. You're not in the wrong. This is the epitome of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They stole your cat and tried to refuse to keep him. It's not your fault that they did that. It's definitely not your fault that the guy was evading arrest. Keep your cat indoors in case they try again, and know that you did everything right. You're not in the wrong. Anyone in the neighborhood who mentions him to you, make sure you tell them exactly what you told Reddit. They're thieves who wouldn't return your stolen property. The police intervened because that's what they do in cases of theft. That her husband had an arrest warrant out wasn't your fault, but it does show that his word shouldn't be trusted when it comes to the outright theft they committed. If anyone insists about the dad angle in all this, remind them that he didn't do the arrest. He sent a neutral deputy to investigate, and the deputy made that arrest. Next up, I'm a 55-year-old woman, and I raised my son as a single mother. Recently, he graduated from grad school, which was a significant moment for both of us. His wife, my daughter-in-law, also graduated at the same time. To celebrate my son's achievement, I gave him a special gift, a bit of cash, because, as his mother, I felt incredibly proud of him. I raised him on my own, and this accomplishment felt personal to me. I assumed my daughter-in-law would receive gifts from her own parents, so I didn't think to include something for her as well. However, shortly after, my daughter-in-law sent me a text saying she was hurt that I only acknowledged my son's graduation and not hers. She explained that she thought of herself as part of the family and had hoped for at least a card or a small gesture, not necessarily the same monetary gift. She shared that she felt overlooked, as though all her hard work had been dismissed. While I understand where she's coming from, I don't feel like I need to apologize or justify my decision. I wanted to reward my son individually for his achievement, and that's what I chose to do. Let's start judging. You're in the wrong. She's 100% right that it's more about the gesture and thought. A card would have sufficed. When my husband graduated, his parents bought him a car. When I finished graduate school, not at the same time as him and long before we were married, they got me a grocery store orchid. I was incredibly touched by them considering me. Your choice to reward your son individually with money is not what's in question here. It's your choice not to celebrate your daughter-in-law's accomplishment that is the issue. So the fact that you typed this sentence is telling. I don't feel like I need to apologize or justify my choice in wanting to reward my son individually. It makes it clear you don't even respect her enough to listen to her about what she's actually getting upset about. This is the equivalent of getting your son an elaborate gift for Christmas and nothing at all for your daughter-in-law, and then saying, I don't think I need to apologize or explain why I wanted to get my son a gift. She's asking you to apologize and/or explain why you completely ignored her accomplishment. Not to get defensive about your right to celebrate your son's accomplishment. No one is questioning you getting your son an individual gift. She's simply pointing out that it was thoughtless and a bit rude to do nothing to acknowledge her accomplishments too. You clearly saw graduation as something to honor and celebrate, and trying to justify it by saying you were a single mom and she has her own parents is problematic, especially if her parents have been welcoming to your son, which they potentially have. Neither of their graduations from graduate school are primarily about you. Both of them put in the hard work. Both of them are your family. Obviously, you might do more for a son than a daughter-in-law, but celebrating one and completely ignoring the accomplishments of the other is not great. And it's a little worrisome that you tried to imply the reason you want to honor your son's accomplishments more is because you see them as an extension of your own. It's giving main character energy. This is one of those situations where you're telling your daughter-in-law that you don't actually consider her family at all, which may seem small, but has some longer-term impacts if she and your son do stay married for many years. Even if you're purely as selfish as you came across here with this one post, there will probably come a point where she won't consider you to be family either, after smaller incidents like this happen repeatedly, and if they have children or you ever need elder care, expect to lose out. You're in the wrong. A card, a bouquet of flowers, or a letter acknowledging how hard she worked would have been minimal effort on your part and been special to her. She is being honest with you. Perhaps validating her feelings might be a great way to have a deeper relationship with her. You're in the wrong. You didn't even get her a card? Harsh. Well, congratulations. You just bought yourself less time with your son. If he's smart, he won't hang around often with people who don't treat his wife right. Now, to be fair, you did say you were single for most of your life, so you aren't used to thinking about others.